Welcome back, everyone. So we've got a Cessna Cardinal, a 177 RG in the shop. We're doing an annual, but we're doing a little bit of maintenance on the landing gear. The tires on these wear because nobody ever flies more. There's my guard dog. Check him out. Anyway, so because nobody ever flies these things at gross, the tire gets worn on the outside a lot more than the inside. So we're going to rotate these tires around, and we'll get way more life out of them. They're like $900 to change these things now. So the owners requested that we do this. So I'm going to just run you through how I generally do a tire change. It's going to be the same thing as changing the tire as rotating it around the other way. So this is basically how I proceed with the job. So we'll take the hubcap off. This is back to the side. So generally, you deflate the tire when you're working on these things. I had a guy that undid the bolts with the tire inflated. These things have 60 pounds pressure in them. Well, when the last nut finally let loose, it kind of tore his nose off. I had to take him to the hospital. Not a good scene. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to deflate the tire. Now, if this was a really high pressure tire, like on a Falcon Jet or any type of transport category airplane, you got to be really careful letting the air out of the tires on those, because you'll get air in your skin if you with the 200 pounds pressure or whatever it is. So you want to use a tire deflating tool that you screw in to let the pressure off. But these lower tires, I'm not going to worry about it too much. So you'll notice that I jacked the airplane up, and because the airplane was already up on the other side, I already rotated the tire on the other side. These airplanes generally walk in a little bit. The wheel walks in and the jack will tilt. So I recommend dropping the jack down after you get it up off the ground, and then redo it to reduce the tension so it won't fall off the jack. It's a little teetery. This airplane is kind of convenient. It already has a jack pad built in. There's a lot of airplanes you have to put an adapter on, or you jack it up on the fuselage or whatever. Actually, there's a Cardinal on the field here, and it's missing that jack pad. There's no way of jacking that one up easily. So what I'm going to do is we'll cut the lock wire on the brake. Bolt's holding the brake on here. Now, look at this. We've moved into the 21st century here. Battery powered tools. Aircraft mechanics. Not a good idea to let that fall on the floor. So when I take those off, I have a look at the pads. These pads, they have a wear indicator on them. So these have just been changed. They're in really good shape. And if you have like multiple pads on here, like a twin Comanche or something, there's going to be two pads over here. You want to make sure you keep them lined up and put them back on the same way they were, or they're going to wear really badly. So the next thing I do is I give this tire a wiggle. Check the bearings. Give it a nice spin, listen to it, inspect the tire for damage. But what I'm checking here is I'm making a note whether I have to do anything with the bearings or not. This thing's running nice and smooth. The other side, all I did was grease the bearings a little bit. I'll show you how I do that. So the next thing we do, we pull the cotter pin out of the wheel nut. We never reuse these, so kind of mangle it, doesn't matter. I never reuse a cotter pin. Channel locks are good enough to take these off because there's hardly no tension on them. There shouldn't be any tension on them. Okay, once we get there, we just slide the wheel off, set it off to the side, and for safety, let's put a block of wood underneath the axle, just in case somebody jumps in the airplane or the wind comes up. I got the door open. You wouldn't want this airplane to fall on the axle and damage those threads and The wing might fall on top of something on the other side. We don't know what all's over there. I checked it before I jacked it to make sure it wasn't going to hit on anything. So next thing we're going to do is we're going to break the bead on this. I always leave the bolts holding the wheel halves together because when you break the bead, if it moves, you won't be able to break the bead on the other side. You may damage the rims. So it's a good idea to leave the bolts in. I'm also going to mark where the valve stem is on this tire because I'm turning it around. That's the light spot of the tire. So you want to have the valve stem lined up on that when you put it back together. So we got her marked. So these tires are a lot thicker than like a Cessna 172. These are 1500 by 6, or 15 by 6.0 by 6 it says on it, 6 ply. So it's a lot harder to get it off the bead. A lot of times on a 150 or a 172 or a Cherokee, you can just push down on that with your foot or your hand and break the bead. But this one here, using all my weight on it, I'm hardly moving. Okay, so we've got the tire bead broken now on both sides. So now we're going to take the bolts out of the rim halves so we can get at the tire, change the tube around, or tire around on here. Generally I just give them I crack these bolts. There's 3 of them on this one only. These are 1/2 inch wrench, so they're 5/16. 5/16 bolts holding this one together. A lot of them are only 1/4. So let's take the nuts off. Okay, let's get the washers out of here. Well, it's only got 2 washers installed. Oh wait a minute, there's the other one. It's got 1 thin one and 2 thick ones on there. The bolts were all in safety, so that's not a big deal. Okay, so we got the bolts off. We'll take the brake off with the bolts attached. We'll set it over here, and this thing's probably stuck again, because it's a pretty thick tire. So I have this little piece of wood that I made that I kind of wiggle in there. So this one's being a little bit of a bitch. Okay, so we got 1/2 off. I usually take the back half off first. Easier. Okay, so we'll just set those down on the table for now. We'll pull our tube out. Now this one, the tube inside here, it looks nice and smooth. The one that I took off on the other side, it was all wrinkly, so I would never reuse that. This one I would be tempted to reuse. This is a Goodyear Flightmate tube in here. I'm not sure what that other one is. I'm gonna have to look at that because it was all wrinkled. So, and this is thick, really thick rubber. The ones I'm putting in are a Michelin tube, and they're a little softer. So, I don't know. Let's have a look at this other one over here. Here's the tube I took out of the other side. You can see it was wrinkled on the inside. It's an air stop Michelin, so that's what I'm putting in. So I'm not really happy about that. It was wrinkly there, and it was also wrinkled in here. So that causes tube failures, like that one there. That could be from somebody putting the tire, putting the tube in and not inflating it and deflating it. I'm going to show you how I do that as well. So anyway, what I do is I inspect the inside of the tire, make sure there's nothing in there, and then I give it some talc. The tube wasn't stuck in here, so I know there's lots of talc in there already. I've already pre-talced my new tube, and I know it's the right size, so we're going to flip the tire over. Don't forget to flip the tire over. And our heavy spot is over here. This is our light spot. So, let's put the tube in. Okay. After you got the tube in there, I want to put a little bit of air in that to hold it so it's nice and straight. I put a little bit too much air in that. That's good. Okay, so next we'll put the inspect the rims. These rims are in pretty good shape. There's no corrosion. A little bit of rubber stuck on here is actually a good thing. It'll stop it from slipping. Slam the brakes on hard if you get any grease on there or anything. So I line up the valve stem through the hole here and put the that half on. Flip it over. Grab the other half, inspect it. You can see somebody's prying it with a screwdriver a few times, taking the tire off, so there's a little damage in there. That's not really good, but I don't think it's going to break. So what I do is I put the brake disc back in here, and then I look down in there. And make sure that it seats all the way. Metal on metal. No tube stuck in between. I had a guy with a Commander a little while ago, and he put the on the nose tires, there's a notch for the tube, and he had it out by 1/3 of a turn and broke his rim. So you want to make sure that you're putting these rims together correctly. Have a good close look at them. There's a number of different types of rims, and some of them actually look like you can put them together in different holes, and the tube probably won't line up if you do that. So we put our bolts back in. You should really, these are soft locking nuts. You should screw those back on by hand and make sure that they don't turn with your fingers. If they turn with your fingers, you want to replace those nuts. That's they do wear out in time, especially the steel ones. Used to say that they were one-time use. A lot of steel nuts on jet engines and things like that, they're one-time use. You're supposed to replace them every time you take them off and put them back on again, put a new one on there. So let's just run this up a little bit with our high-tech 1/4-inch drive wrench that'll do 30 foot-pounds. So we'll have to be careful putting that back. I'll just bring it up nice and slow until it touches. Okay, now there's a big warning on here: deflate the tire before disassembly. That's a really good idea. And you'll notice on here that it has the bolt torque, 140 to 150 inch-pounds. So I've got my torque wrench set at 145. So I went halfway in between. And I'm going to do a video of how I test my torque wrenches. I have a tester that has calibrated bars and weights, and I can test my torque wrench tester, and then I can certify my own torque wrench. It's really handy when you're like putting an extension on, like for torquing a propeller or something like that. You can just go up to the torque wrench tester and set it. You don't have to look at the reading. You don't have to do any calculating. Okay, I'm going to go around one more time just to make sure I didn't miss one because I'm talking. 1, 2, and 3. So, it's all torqued. Let's put some air in it. So, you gotta get a pair of needle nose pliers on here to hold the valve up in place because you can't get on there. Okay. A little bit of air came out of the rim there. Okay. Put this fancy tool on here. I'm going to put about 50 pounds pressure in here. I know it holds 68 because it's written on here. These hold a lot more. So there's 50 pounds pressure. Now, I'm just going to grab the deflating tool. Forgot it over there by the airplane. Okay, so I always let the air back out of the tube after it's in there and inflated up to just about operating pressure. That'll relax it and it'll probably, it may stop it from looking like that. I don't think I've ever seen that written anywhere, but I watched old guys, older than me, do it years ago. So, we're going to put the pressure back in again. I'm going to run it up to about 50. It's supposed to be at 68, but I'll do the final filling on the airplane. That way the axle nut is holding it. If the rim fails, it may stop it from clipping me in the ear. Okay, so we've got the tire back on. So generally every time I take a wheel off, unless I know it's been really recently, I always have a look at the bearings, and I did listen to them already, so I know the bearings are in pretty good shape. So we'll just, the owner did request that I have a look at them. So I'll take the bearings out of the races, keep that one, and don't mix them up if you can help it. That's the outer one. And this is the inner one here. So generally what I do is I give it a quick inspection in here, get rid of any dirt around the edge, have a look at the race. I know it's going to be good because it didn't make any noise. Get rid of the dirt around here. You can spend all day cleaning this thing, but it'll look the same in a week, so I don't spend a lot of time cleaning wheels, especially one with a hubcap on it. So the next thing I do is I wipe off all the parts. This is the dust seal. It's just felt with 2 washers on it, so it's not exactly waterproof. This is not automotive quality. So I just clean these so I don't get dirt back in it when I put it together. I don't wash anything with Varsol on bearings, because if you don't dry all the Varsol out of there, it's going to go into the grease and you've done more damage than good. I was at a conference years ago. I worked at Air Canada, and Timken Bearing came up and told us to never wash bearings, even though they were doing it there and continue to do so. But I'm a firm believer in just cleaning the exterior and pushing some clean grease through. I have never had a bearing fail because of lack of maintenance. So that's what this is how I recommend doing it. I just clean this little bit of dirtier grease. It's really not dirty, it's just discolored a bit. So And for you young guys out there, you probably want to wear a glove. I'm already old, so I don't know how much this stuff's been absorbed in my body over the years. Probably way more than I want to know about. Anyway, I do it the old way. I don't like the bearing packer. So this is the outer one, so I'm doing it first. So I'm just I've got the wide end of the bearing and I'm pushing the grease through with my palm. And you can see that there's very little dirty grease coming out of there. So this thing's been serviced. There's very little. There's a very, very little bit of grease there that's got the dirt. So I just kind of wipe that off. Okay, so that bearing is greased. So let's stick that one back in the hole. And we'll do the inner bearing. This one's got a little more dirt in it, so we'll wipe that off as we go. Okay. So let's put that down right there. Clean my hands a little bit. Okay, so I just kind of pack the grease around in there a bit, put the dust seal back on. These will go back in by hand. You can see it goes in a groove there. This other bearing. Okay, so we'll just make sure we don't have any grease on the brake disc before we put it on. Okay, so now we've got our tire to go ready to go back on the axle. We'll get the block out of the way and we'll slide our wheel on. We'll check the axle itself, make sure that it all looks good. There's only one hole in these axles to get for locking the nut. So they're usually too tight or too loose. I've had to re-drill them and put an extra hole. You're allowed to put another hole in them. Okay. So generally what I do is I take a cotter pin and push it through the hole. Make sure I can get my cotter pin in first without anything there. And sometimes it's pretty difficult. So I always check the cotter pin to make sure it goes through the hole without anything before I put a nut on there. So here's our nut. Put the nut on. We know where the angle that the hole is, so we'll put it on here. The nut should go on all the way. Okay, well, this one's going to be really loose there and really tight there. So we haven't got much choice. Let's have a look here. It's actually, see, I use a cotter pin puller and I put it through the hole here. So it's actually pretty good. It's slightly on the tight side, but it's acceptable. These aren't driving down the highway. So there we are, we'll put that in. And be nice to the next guy. Don't bend over both sides. Just bend that side over. Give it a nice spin, check it and make sure it's free. And then you can put the caliper on. So the caliper, generally I take the brake pad right off and have a look at it. This caliper has been off of here and it needs a little grease, so just hang on a second. I'll grab some grease on there. So the other side was greased really well, so that's why I didn't have grease ready here to put on this side. I assumed that they'd both be the same, considering they both got brand new pads on them. I like to coat these bolts because it's going into aluminum here. I like a little bit of grease on those as well. There. A little surprised that there was no grease on there at all. So we put our pad back in. So I forgot my wrench back at the bench, so I got it, so I stopped the video for a second. So I just tighten these up evenly. Give them a little snug. This thing has way too much torque. And then I give it a wiggle. Make sure that it's got some play. Well, I'm back again. So there was a lot of play in that because I forgot to put the inner pad in, so I stopped the video. Anyway, it's lucky it's on the floor there. If I wasn't talking, I'd probably pay a little more attention to what I'm doing. So I'll just lock wire this thing up. So this procedure basically is the same whether you're changing a tire or just rotating it around. Most airplanes are, like smaller airplanes, are a lot easier to do than this one because this tire is a lot thicker and small. You know, it's heavy on the sides and it doesn't bend very well. So it's a lot harder to get off the bead. Probably pretty hard to do it without a bead breaker. So anyway, so there it is. All we got to do is top up the air. We're going to bring it up to 68 pounds and put the hubcaps on, and then we're gonna jack this thing up. It's going to come up off the ground about 20 inches because we're going to do a gear retraction. So I'll do a little video of that, and I'm also setting this thing up for a dynamic propeller balance. I'm going to put all the stuff on it while it's in here, and I'll video an actual airplane. If you go on and check out some of my videos on propeller balancing, I was just using the test rig. I was waiting for an airplane to come along to do it on. This one, he says the screws are falling out because it's vibrating. We'll find out what the level of the vibration is. Anyway, have a great day.